Welcome, everyone, and welcome to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games. My name is Michael Walker, and I'm here with my good friend, Mark. How are you this week, Mark?
Word to your mother, Walker.
Word to my mother?
Yeah, to your mother.
That's awfully nice, yes.
Yeah.
She had the same fate as I did. She had a small stroke.
Yeah, that's rough.
Which affected her speech and memory only, but every day she seems much, much better.
Excellent. She's
already got her home date, in fact, so that's
marvelous.
Nice. Yeah, all's better there.
Special shout out to any listeners who might be familiar with Providence Care. It is a fine, fine medical institution.
It's true. Like, unbelievably lucky here in Kingston that we have such a facility.
Shout out to all primary care providers, frankly. It is thankless work, and we would like to thank you. I used to work as a medical ethicist. I've worked with these individuals. They are, as a rule, saintly in their disposition. But we're going to be talking about board games this week. We are going to be talking about the AYURIS, the game we reviewed roughly 1 year ago. We're going to be talking about the games we played last week. We're going to talk about the news and why it doesn't matter. And then we're going to launch into our topic, which is the social contract, in the context of board games, obviously. We're not going to be talking about Rousseau as much as I would like to. Actually, as much as I would not like to. I do not like Rousseau. Anyway, let us proceed to the as yet unnamed retrospective intro segment, the AYURIS. Last year, we reviewed City of the Great Machine. This was a 1v-all kind of sort of hidden movement-ish game by German Tikhomirov and published by Crowd Games. And it is the kind of thing that we play, we review, and then never think about again.
Yeah, I've had no wish to play it again. It just seemed like an awful lot for so very little at the end.
Agreed. And when Sniper Elite exists, first of all, it's a genre that we're not particularly fond of. We do not like the structure of 1v-all. On top of that, I personally have a number of quibbles with the hidden movement genre. Now, I will grant you that some of those quibbles, like weirdnesses about line of sight, strange elements where a mistake can derail the game in terms of tracking or paperwork because it needs to be hidden, City of the Great Machine avoided a lot of those. It was very transparent where someone was and whether or not they could be captured doing various things. That part was fine. But it still had the 1v-all part, and I agree with Walker. It was a little more cumbersome than it needed to be. And again, frankly, when Roger Tankersley and David Thompson's excellent, excellent Sniper Elite exists, we would not be tempted to stray very far.
Agreed. That is the game we reviewed exactly 1 year ago.
Sometimes in the AYURIS, we look it up and say, oh, yeah, that one. And then sometimes in the AYURIS, you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, hold on half a second. I have literally spent no thought about this in the year since. What was this? Oh, that one. This is one of those cases.
Yeah, that one where you're flipping the tokens back and forth between
anyway.
And then counting movement and being, you need extra movement because there's robots.
Robots in the way, yeah. Yeah, too many robots.
Too many robots.
So, let us move on to the games we played last week. Walker, what'd you play last week?
Mark, we sort of proxied a deck and we played River Rats that just finished up on Kickstarter. This is designed by Mathijs Jansen and Robin Stokkel and published by Four Suit Studio. And it's not the gang, but it is a cooperative
poker
take thing. And it felt a little samey as we were going through it, but I think we figured out that with only 2 players, it didn't play quite right, and it might play a little bit different with more players. So I am eager to get back to it. You have the sort of hand you're playing against that you have to feed into every turn, and you're also trying to improve your own hand, and so you just have to make sure you beat that. And special abilities, everyone's given sort of a persona, which gives you something you can do. Anyway, I was enjoying it. I just would like really much to play it with more people.
I, too, would very much be interested in trying it with more. I thought it was a little stale with 2 players, because the way the game works at its core is the boss character gets a 5-card hand with a couple of hidden cards, and once it's revealed at the end for resolution, they'll make the best poker hand possible. And the players, one at a time, are just adding cards to your collective hand. And again, with 2 players, it's just not particularly satisfying, especially after the first little while. Like, the conceit is cool. I like it. On top of that, every suit has a special ability. You're manipulating the market. You can manipulate how much you're effectively betting for a current round. You can increase the pot, which is called the debt limit. There's also this interesting notion of having a target hand. You're incentivized to make a certain kind of poker hand. So most of the time it's going to be a straight, just based on the way it shakes out. And if you do that, you'll get access to a Joker, which is wild, which you can play at some point later at someone's choosing. We never did that. We tried, but we never quite pulled it off. Again, the way two-player dynamics work doesn't seem to lend into the game's purported strengths. And then there are special abilities on top of that. They've done a relatively interesting job with the core concept. We talked about this on Pledge of Indifference, where we talked about crowdfunding. I am a huge fan of what I will call the regicide model, which is we have found a way to make a very hobby-style game out of a standard deck of cards. And what we are going to do in the crowdfunding campaign is make the rules available, sell a specialized deck of cards with really cool artwork, and granted, river rats as anthropomorphic animals again, with some cybernetic augmentations. You're fighting against cybernetically enhanced rats, which is definitely a vibe. But I do like the style of the artwork, even though the material has been done to death. And so you can try it beforehand, you can buy the customized deck, or you can pledge for the print and play. And this is an economic model of which I'm a great fan. And that was one of the reasons why, after going through Pledge of Indifference, I thought, let's just try River Rats. It seems potentially promising. I will observe, though, this is more of a cultural observation than anything else, the extent to which, in the widespread popular imagination, Texas Hold'em is poker. And so the fact that River Rats doesn't really have any Texas Hold'em conventions, you found a little bit daunting as a barrier to entry, because you kept assuming that we had a hole, and there was the whole thing, and there was no flop in the river. And,
yeah, when I was a child, there was no, I'm sure there was Texas Hold'em, but nothing that, had made so big in Canada yet. And so playing just traditional poker was something we did a lot of, right? You give up.
You mean 5-card draw?
Yeah, 5-card
well, that's
draw.
just it. There is no traditional poker. What traditional poker is changes from time to time, right?
Yes.
When I first was introduced to poker, 5-card draw was kind of the default, but then you're informed that 7-card stud is what real poker players play, and that 5-card stud is acceptable as a substitute, but draw is for babies. We do not endorse this view. I am merely repeating what I've been told. But then Texas Hold'em basically took poker, the poker world by the neck, and shook it until it fainted unconscious, and all that was left was Texas Hold'em. This metaphor got away from me a little bit. Yeah. All right? Let's just pretend it never happened.
Okay, let's...
But yeah, it's so dominant in the cultural imagination, it actually made the fact that we nominally start with 2 cards in our hand make you assume that was some sort of hole, that these were the whole cards that we had. But that's not how it works.
And the fact that, there's 3 cards, it was like, the way the setup went.
Yeah, the market has 3. Yeah. You're right. There's 3 cards face up in the market. You're sitting on 2 cards in your hand. Yep, I hear you.
River Rats.
I'll
just quickly go. I also got to play The Gang this week. This is by John Cooper and the late Kory Heath, put out by KOSMOS, and this is a straight-up cooperative Texas Hold'em poker game where you are taking betting chips. They're ranked, 1 through how many players there are, and the chip that you take is you're trying to convey to the other players how strong your hand is. And as the turn and the river come up, you're taking either higher or lower chips so they can kind of track where they are, and then you need to win 3 rounds in order to win the game, and then as you win rounds, you're going to get penalties. So we actually had the one card that other people hated that I love. It's called the fingerprint scan.
I do not like that card.
And we succeeded. So what you have to do in the fingerprint scan is that everyone but the last player reveals their hand. So at the end, the person with the lowest chip reveals, and then you work your way up. And then when you get to the final player, you actually have to say what they have, not their actual cards, but their rank. Like, we think he has 2 pair or 3 of a kind. And so you just go through their betting chips and you see the turn in the river. It's like, well, he bet a lot here. Probably doesn't have the full house. He probably has 2 pair, and we succeeded. So anyway, Gang is fantastic. I really enjoy every play of the Gang.
Do you just stack the deck so fingerprint scanner comes up every time? Maybe that's what's going on.
Maybe. Yeah. I'd be happy with that.
There you go. He admitted it.
I just wish I wasn't I was the last player, unfortunately, so I didn't get to.
Oh, you didn't get to engage with that level.
Yeah.
Did they get it right?
They did.
Okay, good stuff. What'd you have?
The 2 pair.
On the topic of card games, played another game of Scout, the climbing game by Kajino, published by Oink Games. Massive fan of Scout. This is the tragedy of a lot of trick-taking games and climbing games is that it's hard to find a really good balance between number of rounds to play. Sometimes it feels too short, or at least too short to balance out the luck of the draw. And if you play more rounds to balance that out, sometimes it feels like it's a little bit getting too long. I've never really had that problem with Scout too much. We played with a full complement of 5 players, and so we're going to play 5 full rounds. And honestly, though, I didn't bother me. I was kind of bracing myself, mostly because, again, I remember this generalization about other card games. Part of it is that a round in Scout can end pretty precipitously. Typically not by virtue of one condition as opposed to another. So there's 2 ways for a round to end. Either someone goes out of cards, or a set is played that defeats everyone at the table. In a 5-player game, it's very difficult to do that latter condition. Although, I must confess, it happened once in the context of our game. People were a little bit too car happy. If you're familiar with Scout, using your card is a once per round ability. It allows you to both scout a card from the current set and then immediately play, then beating that set. And if you use those too early in the round, you find yourself vulnerable. And I was shocked when someone played a 5-card run, and that beat everyone at the table, and it ended the round. I don't think I've ever seen that in a 5-player game. Anyway, I'm more than happy to accommodate different play styles for different player counts. An example I always give is Raw. When you're playing Raw and you're playing with 5 players, you have to be much more willing to settle. And look, I'm very good at settling. I'm a champion settler. Have you seen my co-host? And ultimately, in the context of Scout, similarly, you have to expect that the round is going to go the distance and that someone's going to end the round by voiding of cards. So I was quite taken aback by this turn of events. But I'm always happy to play Scout. It is probably my favorite climbing game. It is one of my favorite fillers of the past few years. Great time was had by all. Scout.
I got to get Storm Raiders back to the table, and I showed 2 new people this game. This is designed by Shem, Phillips, and put out by Arkus Games. It's a post-apocalyptic pick-up and deliver type game with a giant tornado whirling around the board. And so you're taking your trike or your plane or your sub, and you're going between these different spots, grabbing resources, delivering them to cities, while you're upgrading your vehicles and or trying to take as least amount of damage as you can, because damage, limits your movement, because you're drafting dice from the center. They have to increase in value. Damage also goes in those slots. So it's this constant balance of trying to keep your tableau clear of damage and dice, and figuring out when's the best time to rest, which clears your board of some of both, because that's also a balance. You take either a high die. For every 2 pips, you get to heal a damage, but then you're only, say you took a 6, that's 3 damage off, but then you're only removing dice that are 6. You're only removing your 6s. You remove dice that are equal to and higher than the dice you picked to rest. And so it's this, trade-off of what you're going to do. Lots of different abilities on your vehicles, special ability on your leader. You get these crew cards that help you out. I thought the scoring was interesting. One of the players even, messaged me later and wanted to know the name of the game. That's always a good sign.
Oh, good.
That is Storm Raiders.
How long was the playtime? Because when we played initially, you were optimistic that the playtime was going to go down. Granted, you were playing with new players again, as is often the case.
True. With the teach, it was an hour and a half.
Okay. Still probably a touch longer than you wanted it to be, as I recall. You were very hopeful that with experienced players, you could knock it out in about an hour.
Yeah, I think we should be able to.
Okay. I continue to be introducing people to games from the SWAG canon. SWAG canon, of course, being the list of games that Walker and I can agree with, but so naturally some of these are my all-time classics and my personal favorites, and one of those being my favorite game of all time, Tigris and Euphrates, which is sadly very much out of common rotation hobbyist circles. For one reason, it's unclear who owns the rights at the current moment, and it is kind of sort of out of print. There are a number of editions floating around, and frankly, all the English editions that I've played have been very good. The one that's probably the easiest to lay your hands on is the Fantasy Flight / Wind River / Z-Man Games edition with plastic monuments and plastic leader pieces. It's okay. I prefer other ones, but it's not that I find the Fantasy Flight one deficient. And indeed, after the previous time that I'd played Tigris and Euphrates a couple weeks ago, one of the players went out and acquired his own copy of Tigris and Euphrates, and we used that copy to introduce other people to it. And once again, it was a bit jarring from a generational standpoint. It doesn't feel like games released in the past little while. I think one of the specific comments from one of the players was, I thought it was going to have tracks. To which the response is, Reiner Knizia doesn't really do tracks, and when he does, they don't feel particularly tracky. And it's one of the reasons why I love Reiner Knizia. But anyway, setting all that aside, Tigris and Euphrates remains another joy. Every game is different. This game had relatively slow monument buildup until near the end, where there were, I believe, 6 monuments on the board, which is a lot. And at that point, the scores tend to spiral out of control if you're able to grab the monuments you want. But by that point, the board was so cluttered and confused, and all the kingdoms were so vulnerable to external conflicts, that, frankly, there wasn't as much dynamism as you would expect from a map like that. It was weird. There were these strange, interesting, but strange stalemates by virtue of battle lines, because there was only one strong kingdom left that had a good selection of tiles from the 4 colors that could easily go and stomp on neighboring kingdoms if it needed to. And so that threat dominated a lot of the late game. And that kind of tension, those trade-offs, those elements of making yourself weak to external conflict, but increasing your point generation through a monument, but can you keep the monument? That is one of the many tensions that drives through Tigris and Euphrates. And I am a massive fan, and I'm willing to play it at any given opportunity, any edition, Tigris and Euphrates. Originally published by Hans and Gluck in 1999. Many people still prefer that edition. My favorite is the Pegasus edition, but whatever. It's okay, I'm flexible.
It's Tigris and Euphrates.
It's Tigris and Euphrates, absolutely. 100%.
This week's stream game is called Core of Discovery, a game set in the world of Manifest Destiny, which means it's based on a comic book or graphic novel. This is designed by J. Cormier and Sen-Foong and published by Off the Page Games. And what this is a deduction type game. So there were some problems. It was a Kickstarter, and they did something with... You open up the box and it already has replacement parts, which isn't terrible. It's great. Look, they're fixed. But let's pretend there's a bunch of maps, Mark, and they messed up map 2 and 5.
In this pretend world, do I have any superpowers?
No.
Why not? If we're going to do a pretend world, can I have...
You can fly.
Thank you.
Okay. So they messed up 2 and 5.
And I can fly.
And you can fly.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of... In the maps are double-sided. So instead of giving you replacements of 1 and 2 and 4 and 5, they give you one sheet that has 1 on one side and 5 on the back. And they want you to put X's on the sheets that you have in your game now.
I see.
Unacceptable, in my opinion.
Even if I can fly?
Even though you could fly. Second problem that didn't have an actual fix for it is that there are rules for this deduction game. As in, you need wood. Well,
was that a stretch goal? Were the rules like a special event? Oh, okay.
No, like you're on this map and you're looking for wood. Wood can only be beside water, and villages need to be beside mud. And if you want mud, it's next to this. So all these rules in order to find things. And they had 2 different sets for like the different scenarios. Unfortunately, the only cards that I had were for the later scenarios. They had 2 that were the same. I didn't even have the rules for the starting scenario. So the game was unplayable out of the box. So
I feel bad for you.
Kind of rough.
From up in the sky.
So, long story short, after printing new sheets, off we went. And like I said, I backed it because I thought it was interesting and it would be fun. And it was. And so you are trying to kill minotaurs, Mark.
Oh, this took a turn.
It took a turn.
I heard about villages. I heard about mud.
And so it has sort of like a Robinson Crusoe feel. And I think one thing that was off-putting is that you don't actually move your team or your figure. You just you lift up this token off the map and it reveals, what's underneath it, be it a stone or mud or, whatever it is. And you use the rules and you try to deduce what could be next. What could be next?
Right.
But every token that you take off adds to the timer of these challenge cards, and when they get to a certain point, they resolve, and you have to have certain resources, or else you fail.
Right.
And you have like sort of a water supply, and that's sort of your timer. When you run out of water, death. And so, in order to kill the minotaurs, you have to find the minotaurs. And then in order to kill the minotaurs, you have to find the forts, and they're going to tell you how to kill the minotaurs. So first find the minotaurs, find the forts. They'll tell you how to kill them, and then you have to gather resources and kill the minotaurs. We were very close. Unfortunately, we ran out of water, and all of our people died. Oof. It was very sad. But long story short, you have your character card has special ability. You get a gear card, and you're just trying to do all these different things in order to, find the minotaurs and, not run out of water.
So you really like deduction games.
I do.
You've been getting a bunch of them recently. How do you think Core of Discovery stacks up?
Fairly good. I think that, like I said, something about the theme is I'm not saying is making me not like it. It's just, I think it's just this weird. There's too much, there's too much theme. I don't even know how to say it. It's just off-putting for some reason. It's just like because you're not really moving anything around. All you're doing is taking off this token and trying to keep enough water and figure stuff out.
Okay.
Yet they've all these like really interesting pictures and story and all this stuff going on. But in the end, all you're doing is lifting up a token, and then it's the next player's turn.
You felt that there was just a thematic disconnect between what the world was trying to tell you and what you were actually doing in the game.
Yes.
Fair enough.
But I'm looking forward to playing more. They come with a ton of maps, so it's a lot of replayability, and it's not as though you can memorize the maps anyway.
Especially if you've got the rules and the right maps.
Exactly.
Yeah. Final question, though. Can the Minotaurs fly?
Yes.
Oh, then I'm in trouble. Do you know what else Jake Cormier and Sen-Foong collaborated to design?
What did they do?
Junk art.
Junk art? Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, they're not dedicated dexterity game designers. There are not many of those in the industry. Kind of, unfortunately.
Well,
I wonder what would happen if you had like a really talented, really dedicated designer and their oeuvre was just dexterity games. That'd be kind of cool.
I was going to say, when you have flying minotaurs, you better be pretty dexterous.
Excellent point. It's only hard-hitting shows like So Very Wrong About Games that are going to address these issues of flying minotaurs.
Exactly.
You're not going to hear this anywhere else.
No.
I'm beginning to think it's a conspiracy of flying minotaurs that the mainstream media is seeking to suppress.
They want you to think they don't exist.
Yeah.
I can see why, right?
Look up, people.
Panic.
Look
right?
up, sheeple.
Yeah. Open your eyes and look up.
On the topic.
Minotaur.
On the topic of exposing people to some of my all-time favorites, Dogs of War got to the table again by Paolo Mori, originally published by Simon in 2014. There's been a reprint threatened for a long time. It's supposed to come out sometime this year with anthropomorphic animals. In this case, look, I'll give them half a pass. Half a pass, because it's called Dogs of War. I would have preferred if it were about, like, dogs playing poker or something. If you're going to do the anthropomorphic animals thing, lean into it and do something truly gonzo stupid. But whatever. We'll see. I'm trying to keep an open mind.
Well, when they said let loose the dogs of war, I don't think they meant, like, attack the dog people or let the dog people attack.
No, it's cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of war. Oh. So I'm imagining, like, mercenary dogs at a water park.
Ah.
I think this is how you should retheme it.
Dogs on a slip and slide. Gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Who wouldn't want that? Does that not sound adorable?
It makes way more sense.
Yeah, I agree. So, Dogs of War is a worker placement game in conjunction with temporary emergent alliances, weird acts of pseudo-betrayal, and a very well-done push-pull tug-of-war mechanic, where you're constantly battling the tension of, who do I want to win this fight? What space do I want to go into? And who do I want to help and hurt amongst my opponents while doing so? And so that, I think, drives a lot of the complicated feelings you might have about wanting to place in different areas. And it does a good job of moderating out a lot of the other, perhaps more elaborate or baroque elements of worker placement. Like, for example, you can get more workers, but your workers are limited by your troops anyway, and you're so cash-strapped you don't tend to have a whole lot of those to throw around. And the workers that you get are temporary in nature anyway, so there's not this drive for more captains, and there's a diminishing returns that set in on top of that by virtue of the spaces that go down. There's not much of an economy to the game. You get $3 at the top of the round, which is not nearly enough, and there's some other ways to get money on the side end. We played without any of the expansion captains, which is both good and bad. One of the downfalls of Dogs of War is that the different captains, the different mercenary captain factions, the powers aren't particularly well balanced against each other. That having been said, I think the biggest offender, the most powerful captain, is in the base game. So one virtue of having some of the expansion captains available is that you can leave her out of the game because she's so powerful. There are, however, a variety of house rules. I'm talking about Lady Macbeth. She's extraordinarily powerful and flexible, and she's very good at gobbling up a whole bunch of bonuses to which she is not entitled. But there are house rules for that. We also played with the designer's recommended house rules. You can find a link to that on Board Game Geek on our website in the SWAG canon. It changes how crushing victories work. and it is very much my preferred way to play. There are downsides to it. It's not a strict benefit, but I think overall it leads to a more dynamic, engaging, interesting version. But I would happily play by the base game rules as it is. I would just advocate for the designer's suggested house rules as it is. Dogs of War, one of our perennial favorites, and as per usual, these people that I'm playing games with, that I'm exposing to some of the games in the can, although I didn't bring my copy of Dogs of War, so I can't claim full credit for this particular instance. It's one of the things where halfway through the game, a couple people are on their phones looking, it's like $400 on eBay, oh no, and trying to find like other copies in the secondary market. I didn't feel great about that part, but I do feel good about, enlarging people's horizons. Dogs of War, Paolo Mori, culminating or not, 2014. And in the future, who knows?
Who knows? I finally got my copy of the new Stroganoff expansion, Turicon. This is Andreas Stedding, put out by Game Brewer, which is a good and a terrible thing all at once. You're happy to get a game from Game Brewer, sad because it will be the last package you ever get from Game Brewer.
Let's pour one out for Game Brewer.
So this new expansion has 4 modules. One is the Chipmunk Trader, which is exactly how it sounds. You add some chipmunks into this pool of animals that you're massacring along the Russian countryside, and you trade him the pelts of the chipmunk, and he gives you something. In our particular game, it was money. In other games, there's like 4 random tiles you put out, and he slowly moves to the north as the game progresses. And then you had a political type module where you go and you trade furs to the local people, and you go up on this track.
In theory.
Unfortunately, and you pick a random landscape type. We had swamp. Unfortunately, only 2 swamps came up in the whole game, and they came up at the very beginning of the game.
And Walker bought them both.
No, you had one and I had the other.
Okay, well, you bought the... See, the problem is the overall dynamic is you can show up at the terrain type, immediately make a donation so you're winning on the diplomatic track, as it were, and then buy that tile so nobody else gets to do anything with that type. So that module was probably the one we were least enthusiastic about.
Thirdly, there's new terrain types, and during Stroganoff, for those who have not played, there's sort of like the A phase at the beginning, the B phase at the end. So the A terrain tiles are wild, and so they can act as any type of terrain.
For set collection.
At the end of the game, you get bonuses for different sets of terrain. And the B ones are like additional scoring. So tigers are worth more money, or money gets you more points, or just sort of end game, more ways you can end game score.
Yeah, Walker became the Tiger King.
I did.
He took the tile that gave him the ability to trade in banners for tigers. I'm not exactly sure how that works, because the banners seemed to indicate you were basically expanding your clan. So I don't know if you were trading humans for tigers and then you were training the tigers.
Unfortunately, I only had one banner, so that didn't pay off great. And I got it right at the end.
You had 1 million tigers.
I did, but that was mostly from, jetting to the end of the track and
sure,
hunting
you still
them.
Profited
it's true.
Very well from being Tiger King.
It is true. And the last one is sort of like a little hunting track. So you get this strip that you put beside your player board, and it gets you benefits for hunting in a particular order, which you then can use to play these King's Wish cards, which I think were underutilized before, because they were very difficult to play because you needed a lot of animals of a certain type.
They were hard to get, hard to cash in, and then the benefits tended to be, in our at least intuitive understanding, not worth it. This is an example, the hunting track specifically, of the kind of module that I'm very much a fan of in the context of expansions. How can we, through a relatively minimal rules overhead, make an underused aspect of the base game more central or more interesting or easier or what have you? I don't know that it did a whole heck of a lot. Like, we didn't do a whole more cards than usual. We still mostly ignored them. But I at least appreciate the nod, and it wasn't terribly complicated.
Yeah, I enjoyed yet another play of Stroganoff. It's very smooth once you get going. There's a little bit of setup, but once that's done, I think it plays very smooth. You go through certain seasons. You go out into the Russian. You try to get far out into the country, into the Russian countries, into Siberia, hunting animals. Sort of purchasing or fortifying, landscape tiles, collecting things. Anyway, lots to like about Stroganoff.
Yeah, Stroganov, we very much enjoy. I think it's Andreas Stedding's second best game after Hunt's Teutonica, which is pretty high praise. He's had a pretty good stable of games. I prefer it over Gugong, for example, which is typically regarded as the other bit of competition for his second best design. I'm sure some people prefer Gugong or perhaps even Stroganov over Hunt's Teutonica, but we don't really have much truck with that viewpoint because of how brilliant Hunt's Teutonica is. I don't think I can recommend Turrican. Here's why. 2 reasons. First of all, Stroganov is already a game where the list of things you can do as an action is pretty long. It's one of its strengths, frankly. The overall structure is pretty simple. You move your dude, you do a couple of actions of different types, but the list of things you can do as those actions are pretty varied, and leveraging those to your advantage is the challenge of Stroganov. Adding more to that list doesn't do a whole heck of a lot, right? So it was a long list, and now with the 4 modules, the list is a bit longer. So, yeah, the rules overhead isn't considerable, but at the end of the day, you're still putting out more components, you're still buying this extra thing, you're still not worth it. I felt that we'd hit diminishing returns, and I didn't object to their presence, but I don't think it added considerably to the nature of the game. The second observation I would make, and this is a minor one, but it's important, is that Stroganov already is about a pretty bloody and terrible act of colonization. Just because it was inside the borders of what was regarded as the Tsardom of Russia doesn't change the fact that the dynamics were fundamentally colonialist in nature, and the violent suppression, elimination, relocation, etc. of indigenous peoples. The fact that one of the modules has you making friends with them is a little weird. I'm not going to say, I don't know enough about this period of history, I'm not going to say that the Cossacks didn't make friends with a whole bunch of other indigenous groups or buy them off with pelts even particularly. I'm perfectly open to that being the case. It just seems like a strange addition to a game that was already a sanitized version of a pretty bloody period of conquest. I think that at least when you're focusing on the mass murder of animals, you're still focusing on the mass murder. So at least there's something. I mean, look, I don't think that Stroganov is especially problematic as board games go. It's certainly not as problematic as your standard whitewashing of colonialist enterprises that a lot of games still are to this day, which is mind-boggling. I just felt that extra note brought Turrican to optional but entirely unnecessary to maybe not, all told. So that, and I don't know what that squirrel trader is doing with those squirrels.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, this is a no questions asked type of situation. Yeah, so I love Stroganov. Happy to play any opportunity. I do find it unfortunate that Game Brewer had to reprint the components to Stroganov so many times. This is the 3rd time they printed a board, for example, because the board wasn't good enough, but then the second board wasn't good enough, and everything needed to be thicker, and people didn't. Thicker and thicker is the story of Stroganov. I don't know. Deluxe means different things to different people. I have a copy of the original base game. It suits me just fine.
And now there's no more Game Brewer.
So there's that. So that's Stroganov Turrican, Andreas Stedding, Game Brewer 2024. Played a game called Veiled Fate. This is a hidden role type of kind of inference deduction subterfuge thing by Max Anderson, Zach Dixon, and Austin Harrison. Published by Ivy Studio after successful crowdfunding in 2022. There has been a reprint with some new expansions, and indeed we played with one of the expansions called Hadria. This was actually designed by Robert Havakamian, who is one of the designers involved in the recent Jazz Cat-based games from Bitewing Games. And so it's just interesting when an expansion is designed by somebody not in the original team. I really did not like the game. I don't know whether I would like it more or less without the Hadria expansion. I suspect I would like it even less. It is a game where there are 9 demigods. At the start of the game, you are assigned one of those demigods. You will win if that demigod is the winning demigod. But you can take actions with any available demigod. Okay, fine. Basic structure we've seen a number of times before. The issue is what you do with those demigods is, I found, pretty uninteresting. What you do is you commit them to quests. The quests have names and require some number of people, and outcomes for everyone who participates on the quest, whether the quest is resolved Feather way or Scorpion way, which it's left up to the imagination what that means. There's no art anywhere on any of this. So when I say it's a quest, it literally means something like the elimination of the Drakes, or famine, or treaty negotiations. No details are provided. That's it. That's all you got. And so I send a demigod to a particular place, And the typical results are, well, if it's resolved this way, they'll go up 2 points. If it's resolved this other way, it goes down 1 point. Okay, so by committing that demigod, parenthetically, this is such a minor gripe, but it bothers me, they're referred to as demis in the rulebook and the player aids. And so naturally, for your first action, you can move a demi, and then for your second action, you can move that demi more. Anyway, I'm sorry. This is, am I wrong? It's always capitalized and it's always demi. Go see Substance, by the way. It's a great movie. Anyway, so I send a demi to go to the whatever treaty negotiation. I'm sending that to that slot. Does that mean that I want the demi to do well? I want the demi to do poorly? Well, I don't know, because it's further attenuated by this card result system, which is hidden. There's some ways you can get limited access to the information of the cards that go into that resolve pile, but there are so many ways that the game decides to lean in and render what is already a very attenuated informational landscape yet more attenuated, because one of the cards that you can pitch in, or could be pitched in randomly, to this resolution pile is draw the top 2 cards of the deck and add it to the resolution pile. So all of those things that Battlestar Galactica did to help you be able to infer who played what, it was an imperfect information environment, but you had a resolution stack for a given quest, and if it went sideways or if it went well, you could try to develop a web of information to figure out why and when. I have a lot of problems with Battlestar Galactica, but that central resolution mechanism I think was pretty solid and was pretty good in terms of delivering information. I felt over the course of Veiled Fate...
Especially like when you got to the 25th time, 30th time that you're doing it,
Look,
it was...
You might think that the game is tedious around hour 3, but it's hour 5 when things really start to sing and it all comes together.
It really cooks.
Yeah, anyway, setting all that aside, Veiled Fate was also too long. Veiled Fate might have given me a little bit more to go on if I took exhaustive notes. On turn 3, she put the demi in slot 2 of this other quest and pitched in a card. So then, 20 minutes later, when that quest triggers, I can be like, it was she that put it there. What does that mean? Probably nothing. But I don't want to take that many notes when playing. No, I'm serious. Like, it would take exhaustive notes to slightly improve the informational landscape. I found the actions uninteresting. I found the information too parsimonious. I found the results too arbitrary. It was literally the case that after playing the game for in excess of 2 hours, everything was going to come down to the last turn anyway. Part of that was the Hadria factor. Hadria is a non-player goddess who will go up and down in points, and at the end of the game, anyone who has more points than her is ineligible for the victory. Now, this introduces a positive effect in that it at least is not going to be vulnerable to the dynamic of many of these so-called hidden games go, where it's like, I don't care about subterfuge, I'm just going to gobble up as many points as I can for my chosen vessel, removing any possibility of intrigue. This is how I felt War of Whispers fell apart. There was just not really much incentive to be to waste some of your precious turns fiddling about, possibly advancing someone else's interest, just so you can confuse people, possibly including yourself. Games of this nature need to have enough ambiguity so that you can engage in misdirection, but not so much that there's no ability to make inference. At least in the case of the Hadria expansion for Veiled Fate, there was a disincentive to be like, well, I'm all in purple. I'm just going to have purple snatch up all the points imaginable. Because if you do that, I imagine one of the problems is then you're left with the situation where it's like, okay, I can either spend my turn advancing my own interests, or I know that he likes purple. I can at least hobble purple. And that's not necessarily a great dynamic. I don't know how it would shake out. As I say, that part is speculation. Hadria at least gives you in a position where if suddenly giving somebody a whole whack of points might actually doom them because Hadria is not going to catch up. But it's another variable that can switch in the last turn, and indeed that's what happened. In the last turn, Hadria, I knew I could end the game, and I know I could put Hadria not quite where I wanted her, but I could move her up 2 spaces or down 2 spaces. So if I was the player sitting to my left, or even 2 spots to my left, it's like they had no control over how the game was going to end. And there was a tremendous ability to swing things wildly. So I guess it's a pick your poison situation. Anyway, there's a lot going on in Veiled Fate, but at its core, it's just these uninteresting quests, one after another, going up and down this favor track, and you want your chosen hidden one to be at the top, or near to the top in the case of the Hadria expansion. I was thoroughly unengaged. I did not enjoy it, especially hot on the heels of 23 Knives. 23 Knives did all of this much better. And my chief complaint about 23 Knives, insofar as I had one, was that the core actions weren't terribly interesting. Veiled Fate makes me think that I should be more permissive towards 23 Knives, because at least there were different environments that did different things. It was, I would play 23 Knives a million times over this. I would play any social deduction game over this, because it was not a social deduction game, but that element of why are they doing what they're doing? Whose side are they on? Who is it that they want to win? Is captured so much better in so many of these social deduction games, whether it's the Resistance, whether it's even Secret Hitler, although that's not my favorite for a litany of reasons now, even if it's something like Among Thieves, where there's some element of doublethink, Scapegoat, you name it. There are so many of these better games, and so we have this lavish Kickstarter thing. I like the graphic design. It's very, very well done. I wish the quests had a little bit of art on them. But I do not see the appeal, frankly, of Veiled Fate. That was Veiled Fate?
Veiled Fate.
And finally, we played Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. This is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game by Gaëtan Beaugenet, Olivier Xipierre, and Jean-Hill, published by Mandu Games. We are living in the golden age of weird trick-taking games, and this is a 2-player cooperative one. And we jumped to the real game. Previously, we'd been playing earlier chapters, which are kind of sort of tutorials. And now we're in a position where Scotland Yard is chasing you, and you want to advance on the track. And you advance on the track at the end of the round by the number of spaces equal to the fewest number of tricks won by the players. So if Walker wins 4 tricks and I win 2, we advance 2 steps. So you're interested in balancing out the wins as best as possible. You also get to advance a step if you win a trick with an 8, which is the highest number, which is very difficult because at the start of the round you have to give all your 8s to the neutral third player. So boo on that. I mean, in terms of the challenge, I don't think it's a bad mechanism. And the inspector will chase you anytime any of you win a 1, 2, or 3. I have no idea. None. In the past, when playing Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard, when Scotland Yard didn't chase you this way, I found the mechanisms intriguing, and I kind of sort of had a vague sense about maybe how to play. Now, I remain intrigued. The intrigue is increased, and I feel like this may be like the first time I've ever been shown a card game. Because I look at my hand, and I know I've got to send 4 of them to the common supply. I know that Walker and I want to win 8s, and we don't want to win 1, 2, 3. And I look at it, and I have no idea what's going on. Zero clue what to do well. The rules are transparent, but I have no conception about how to play well, and I'm fascinated.
And this is driven by the fantastic system as the first color that's played starts ranking the suits. So if I play blue, you put the blue token on the bottom. As soon as if a red's played, then they're second powerful, and then the purple would be automatically the third powerful. And then
it's White Walker.
White.
I realize you would want it to be purple. You love purple, but it's just white.
It could be anything. Yes. Okay. The last one is white.
It could be anything, but it is White Walker.
It is. Or you could say black. You could say the potions were white. Anyway.
Or you could say what the game actually is.
And so it's that tricky mechanism of figuring out which suits that you want to play first. Maybe it's one of these things where you want to get the colors out quickly so you can, rank the suits. And so when the city plays their 8s, then you can easily play cards on top of that. I am not sure. This is what makes it exciting. It's just a whole different take on trick taking and how you play. Like I was telling Mark, normally in order to win tricks, you want to be void of a certain suit so you can play out, all of your cards of one suit and then you won't have to worry about the other one, but it doesn't seem to work this way. I think you have to look at it in a totally different way than you would other trick-taking games. That's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, probably more to follow because I'm not going to say I'm going to try to figure it out because that's too high a bar. I'd like to get a sense of what to do to advance your interests in Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. Very intriguing. So those are the games we played last week. Now a quick break to pay some bills. And we're back. On to the news and why it doesn't matter.
Phantom Division. It's on crowdfunding right now. Go check it out. It is a dexterity flicking science fiction, go in, shoot the enemies.
Or not.
Stealth.
Sneak past them. Stop shooting them, Walker. They're dead. You're making too much noise, Walker. Stop shooting the enemies.
It's a very interesting game. Off the heels of the only game that matters, SEAL Team Flicks.
Walker's not listening to me. He's still shooting the enemies.
Mark, they're not dead until they fly off the board. Phantom Division.
Mike Hutchinson is probably one of my favorite designers working today. He's definitely my favorite tabletop miniatures game designer of the past few years. He is the designer of Gaslands and A Billion Suns and Space Gits and Crawling Chaos, which I was reminded is an interesting RPG concept that I probably want to give a shot to soon. But he has a new rule set with Osprey. Osprey Games has that lovely line of soft cover blue books with miniatures wargame rules. It's called Pacific Command. It is indeed about naval warfare in the Pacific Theater, which is not a theater in which I have any interest, but mechanically it is a lot about just having to find things because the ocean is big. And so much of the time your fleets are proxied by poker chips, and so you don't really know where the enemy is. Finding them is a big challenge, and I respect that as a novel take on miniatures gaming. So I am probably, over the next little while, if I have the opportunity, going to proxy up. I don't have little boats.
Oh.
Proxy up little boats. Possibly I'll just use more Hot Wheels.
There you go.
Works fine. To play a game of Pacific Command. So Pacific Command by Mike Hutchinson, published by Osprey.
So Awakened Realms is enjoying making ridiculous versions of games. And this week crowdfunding is no different. They have Agricola Special Edition.
It's special, all right.
Did you buy a $45 version of Agricola? Well, your version is garbage. If you don't have the $1,000 all-in version of the Awakened Realms...
Is it really? I thought it was 450 euros was the most expensive pledge.
I think that transfers to roughly about $1,000.
No, the euro isn't that strong at the moment. Calm down, Walker. It's an entirely reasonable, eminently affordable 450 euros.
Oh, yes.
Don't exaggerate.
Yes, I'm so sorry. So, yes, if you wanted Agricola and you hadn't bought it yet for some reason, I don't know, maybe you don't like the art, which is amazing and quaint and hilarious all at the same time.
It's got this great cartoon art that's got a lot of personality. Yeah.
This new version is more photorealistic type art.
Yeah, I
so
think
a totally different
look. I think
look.
it's a step back, but
yeah, a lot of people like it.
True.
So if you've always wanted a copy of Agricola and want it to look completely different, I guess, and want all the expansions because they're now available. Some of these card expansions were hard to find.
Yes, that I think is the primary virtue. Possibly getting one of the lower pledge levels just to get the truly voluminous level of cards. If they didn't look so jarringly discordant with the existing edition, and or if I liked the art better, I might even be halfway tempted just as a way to get all the card editions. Because on that basis, if you compare the cost of the base edition to the cost of other editions plus the cost of all those deck expansions, it actually looks like a bargain. But frankly, everything else around it is making that cost calculation different.
Agricola Special Edition. And lastly, I guess because they wanted to have 2 dexterity games and crowdfunding at the same time, Catacombs Alpha is also up on crowdfunding right now. I've talked about Catacombs a lot. It is a sort of D&D flicking type game, one versus all. One person plays the villains, the monsters, while the others play the heroes. And you're flicking arrows and hand-to-hand attacks back at each other with these giant columns and neoprene mats and spells and interesting stuff. The problem always was getting it to the table, setting it up, figuring out what kind of mission to do. This Catacombs Alpha is supposed to streamline all of that, get it to the table faster, and get you playing, and is a great sort of entry level into what is Catacombs.
Finally, once again, open registration is up for SWAGCon, Congrès, So Very Wrong About Games, Fun Times, Good Vibes Only, Trans Rights Are Human Rights, Board Game Jamboree in Kingston, Ontario from July 25th to July 27th. If you want your tickets, you can find them on Eventbrite. There is a link to the event page in the episode notes below, so if you have not already booked your registration, please do. There are still lots of slots available. There is some chance we will run out. I say this not to engender FOMO, I'm just letting you know. There is some small chance that we'll run out, so if you've been delaying, now might be your time. In any case, we hope to see you in Kingston, if at all possible.
It's getting here quickly.
Kingston? No, Kingston's been here all the time.
The date. Yes, that's it.
No, it's actually proceeding at a relatively constant 60 seconds a minute, 60 minutes
one
an
day
hour,
at a time?
kind of one day at a time thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
thanks.
So that's the news and why it doesn't matter. And now let us talk about our topic, the social contract. Walker, are you familiar with the social contract as a metaphor in political theory?
No.
One of the big problems with the social contract as a metaphor is there's this idea that governments get to exercise power on the consent of the governed because the people have kind of sort of almost maybe, if you squint, agreed to some kind of social contract. And then one of the natural questions results is, well, when did they agree? And then typically the answer is some combination of shrug and, well, they kind of sort of tacitly agreed by maybe not leaving.
No, it's a check mark they put on their voting thing. So that's yes, I agree.
Yeah, no, so that's where it falls down as a metaphor, right? It is clearly not a contract. It is a metaphor. It is an implied contract. In the context of governments, frankly, this is a note of a political theory, I don't have much sympathy for social contract theory in that sense. I don't like how you imagine some sort of thought experiment, and that exerts legitimate power in the real world. I'm also not a Rawlsian for much the same reason. But anyway, setting all that aside, we would like to talk about whether, to what extent, and what constitutes the social contract that exists when playing a board game.
So AI has come to the rescue, Mark.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
No.
Oh,
Seriously,
yes.
Walker?
Yeah, yes.
What did you prompt?
AI has said, in essence, the social contract in board games is a collective agreement to create a positive and enjoyable environment for everyone involved. It is a set of unwritten rules to help ensure fair play, good sportsmanship, and a shared focus on having fun.
Why have you tainted SVWAG games with the stink of generative AI?
Because it came up automatically and I thought it was hilarious.
Ugh, I feel dirty. Please don't do that again.
I will not.
I mean, at the same time, I hate to acknowledge that's a pretty good summary, I guess.
That's what I said to inside. I looked at it, I read it, I said, I should work, and it, no.
Well, no, but was it worth A, the fact that probably scraped all manner of copyrighted material, and B, the environmental devastation that was prompted by the mere act of giving it a prompt?
True.
Probably no. So, I'd like to... There's already a lot of sort of social etiquette that underlies board gaming, and that is not unique to board gaming, and it is no different from any kind of shared social experience, whether it's going to see a movie, whether it's going to have tea, whether it's anything. And we can flag those, but they aren't particularly relevant for our discussion. Like, showing up on time.
Yes, well, I have this whole thing on time, like I always do. I'm
a Kantian, so punctuality is a bit of a bugbear for me, but it clearly is for you as well. So why don't you get your punctuality? Yeah.
So I have this giant thing on time. It's like, first is committing to the session. Like, so someone said, let's do games on this day. And then that would be the time where you agree or disagree. And then if you agree, then you should make a good effort to actually show up.
Sure.
Then you should show up at the right time. If the agreement was that we're going to start playing games at 7, then maybe you should show up at around 7, or maybe a little sooner.
Yes. However, I think between the two of us, I have more tolerance for people who bail if the bailing notification is given in advance of the start time. Obviously, sooner is better, but if you bail in advance of when you were supposed to meet, I'm especially if you weren't agreeing to play a specific game. If the game requires an exact player count, obviously that changes the parameters. But if you haven't agreed to a specific game, and or if you know that there are several possibilities, bailing ain't no thing. It doesn't bother me. It seems to bother you.
No, and I don't want to be like legitimate reason, but I mean, like, a lot goes into some people planning out a gaming day.
Yes, that's true.
And not only that, the other people, this could be their only time that they get to play.
Yeah.
And therefore, by losing players, you're now degrading the session as a whole.
Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not. Let me give two examples. All right. One from my own life. I've never played Virgin Queen, the 6-player card-driven war game from GNT, because it's for 6 players. And the day we were supposed to play, in one case with an hour's notice, a couple players bailed. Well, at that point, the event's done. It's done and dusted. It's cooked. There, my nose was a little bit out of joint. On the other hand, compared to my birthday event when we played Mega Civ, Whether we've got 12 or whether we've got 16 doesn't make a huge amount of difference. It alters setup, right? But whatever. Like, it's not going to seriously degrade the nature of the event. So it depends on what you've decided to play, whether you've decided to make an arrangement or whatever. If it's a casual pickup night on the reg, whatever. Advance notice is preferred, but ain't no thing.
The other thing that could happen is that you've told other people that they can't come because you are at your number. So now you've denied people access.
It's true.
To allow these other people to come, and they said, no, I need to buy bread.
Yeah. People need bread.
People need bread.
I'll just say this as a Kantian, because Kantians are infamous for holding promises above what other people would regard as stronger moral obligations. But it is what it is, and I'm not going to get into the details about it. I've done so elsewhere. I have a pretty bad temper, and when I'm sitting there waiting on somebody, especially if I'm there to do them a favor, right? I've agreed to help them somehow, and they're not on time. What that's telling me is that they don't think my time is valuable, and that gets me angry. And so I agree. Like, should I be dwelling on these things? No. Should I acknowledge that the broader social contract of society has basically said that 10 minutes late isn't late? I hate that, but I have to concede it's true. Like, anyway.
Yes. We'll work each other up.
Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I will assert that there is some hazy line where you step over etiquette and move into moral responsibility. Where that is, I don't know, but I think the punctuality in some cases is squarely on the line of moral obligation. Let us move on.
Well, it's still on time, but...
Look, I thought we were going to work each other up anymore.
It's when you know someone has a hard out. When we say hard out, soft out, it's like someone needs to leave at 12. That means they have to be somewhere else. Or if they say they have soft out, it means, I need to be somewhere around 1 and I feel more comfortable if we finished up around. Anyway, long story short, don't be suggesting a 4-hour game when the person only has 2 hours to play.
This, I think, I actually don't think it matters as much whether someone has a soft out or a hard out. I think that as a game suggester, like the role of game suggester, of game presenter, has with it certain additional social obligations past the minimal ones. And one of them is not to lie about the playtime. And some people, I don't know whether it's just hopium or a revisionist memory or a willingness to swallow whatever lies are on the side of a board game box. I've seen people being like, let's play X. It's one of my favorite games. I've played it all the time. Everyone join me. Play X. Like, how long does it take? Oh, only about an hour. And I'm like, that is not true. And I'm not saying it's conscious, but if you're going to suggest a game to people, you should be, look, and the honest answer may be, I don't know. Or it could be, it varies a lot. Sometimes it's really short, sometimes it's super long. But you got to be transparent about those things. Otherwise, it is a supreme act of disrespect, I think.
And knowing the rules, like some groups don't mind learning as they go, but if someone has needs to leave at a certain time, then make sure you're suggesting games that you already know how to play. Don't say, okay, we're going to start now, page 1, and start reading out the rules, because some people are averse to that. They want you to know the game ahead of time and be able to teach it and play it immediately.
Some people named Mark. Yeah. Again, I think your transparency will matter a lot, because I've got no problem. And someone's like, yeah, I can mostly teach the rules. It's going to be a little choppy. That's fine. I mean, at that point, if that's the sort of way it was presented to me, and again, in those contexts, that's a way, I can't help but notice, to move the kind of social contract you're entering into the less metaphorical and to the more explicit, right? Because people are stipulating the terms. It's like, this is how long the game is going to take. I'm not fully ready to teach it yet, but I'll be able to get through the rules explanation. It just may be a little rough. Here we go. It's like, oh, okay, well, you've communicated to me the parameters that I'm about to enter into, and I appreciate that, frankly. You are treating me as a rational individual able to make a decision, rather than subverting my ability to make decisions. Sorry, that's Kantianism again, whatever.
And lastly, on the subject of time, is AP hurts everyone.
Yeah, okay. So this is we're moving past the specific obligations of a game suggestion. This is, broadly speaking, one of the obligations you have when you're sitting at a table. And that is, whether it's you're checking your phone, or whether it's because you've got too much AP, or whether it's because you're engaging in too much takesies backsies, right? There are ways for your turns to start to spiral out of control. And obviously it depends on the game, depends on the group. All of these things are to a certain extent dependent. But it can totally ruin a game experience for everyone else, and I have no idea what to do about it. Like, if someone's spending too much time on their phone, you would think it's just like, could you play the game? Could you not? That doesn't tend to work. They're always back to the phone anyway. And you cannot, we've talked about this so many times, I know of no way to reduce someone's AP. You can try asking them politely, you can try making fun of them, you can try introducing a timer. And
the biggest thing for me is the fact that sometimes people think, well, they'll have fun on their next game, but for some people, this is the one game they get to play for the whole month. And now you're doing something that is degrading that experience.
Yes. It is the case that I think that when you are sitting down to a board game, you are entering into an unwritten agreement, but nonetheless a binding one, that you are going to devote the appropriate amount, loaded terms, of attention and play your turns in a reasonable, loaded term, amount of time. And if you fail to do that, you are violating that agreement, and you are wronging, in addition to harming, the other people at the table. I agree entirely.
There are expectations.
Absolutely. And it's an intentional one. Attention is a valuable resource, but if you, either through AP or because you're paying attention to your phone, not the game or whatever, in so doing, you are depriving the attentional economy of everyone else at the table. Because they're sitting there waiting for you to do a thing. And they could be doing any number of other things with their lives. And whether they've got limited time to game or unlimited time to game, you are nonetheless taking their time away from them. And that, I think, is fundamentally unacceptable in a lot of contexts. Again, when those parameters, how far those parameters go and when you've transgressed the line, it varies from context to context. But it is part of the fundamental agreement that you agree with to enter the game that you are going to treasure other people's time and act appropriately.
So we spend a lot of time on time, but I think it is a very big part of the social contract.
100%.
So next up I have group dynamics, in which I think I want to focus mostly on being the new guy. Mm-hmm. And just sort of like understanding, like just sitting, like if it's your first day at a new group or, this new group of people, just, sitting back and seeing how the interaction works.
Could you give me an example of some of the details?
Well, sometimes with me, I am very sarcastic. And when I go into a new group...
Fair enough.
I don't...
The trash talking.
I don't go full in. Yes, exactly.
Yes,
trash talking and or, being hard on someone when it's obviously I don't mean... You know what I mean? It's like being so over the top.
Yeah.
When I come into a new group, I don't do any of that. I sort of just, sit and play and slowly work it in and see how the interaction between two people works and see how the husband and wife are playing and how they'll just help each other out and ruin the game. And,
well, that's a separate issue.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's a big one. I think it's important. Yeah, I think that's squarely phrased thus. It's squarely in the broader etiquette category. I think that would be true regardless of what you're doing. In the context specifically of games, I can think of specific game conventions, like, for example, takesies backsies. Some groups are very permissive about takesies backsies, and not to an unreasonable degree. It's just how permissive you are. And some groups go all the way towards that, the classic chess saw, you touch it, play as it lays. The moment you let go of it, you're done. And that's not my preference, but I can recognize that it is a legitimate preference, right? And and I fully recognize that in many contexts, I've violated the social contract by engaging in too aggressive a takesies backsies. Because to a certain extent, asking for it can be an imposition. Sometimes, maybe this is very Canadian of me, right? But in etiquette, in some contexts, asking for a thing is unreasonable. In other cultures, not so much, but there's a whole bunch of cultural input there. But in the context of takesies backsies, it's a fine line.
Next up, I have levels of experience. Understanding that some people, like you and I, play games almost every day. Some people play games once a year. And
what?
I believe it or not.
You're telling me this now?
I know.
Oh, okay.
And just being aware that some people don't know what a trick taker is or don't know what
100%.
Deck builders are, and just knowing the lay of the land, understanding that some people are new to this or their just level of experience is different.
Well, that's part of the social contract of hobby gaming that I love, which is that there's the broad expectation that everyone must be at various times called to teach, right? Other hobbies don't have this. Other hobbies and other environments and other groups, and whether they're even professional environments, there are situations where it's like, it is not my job to tell you, right? And it is unreasonable to be asked again from the ground up of something. But one of the glories of hobby gaming is that there is a strong expectation that so long as you're able to devote your full intelligence and your full attention and your full conscious concentration to a given task, that someone can be there, even if you've never played a trick-taking game before, and someone will be able to explain all these things. And there's no question that's, like, other than, what's a game? What are we doing here? Like, so there's certain background assumptions. But when you compare that to other environments, like, try that crap in Bridge. That's not going to fly. Mildred's not going to explain to you what a trick-taking game is. She's got better things to do.
No, she's already pulling you by the ear out the door is what she's doing.
100%. And that's okay. But part of the social contract of hobby gaming is that you must be able to explain anything and everything.
My ear still hurts.
Not always. You can make an appointment to play the specific game, right? You can totally, but that I think has to be made explicit. That is an explicit new contract that you're making. The broader, I think, default kind of social contract for hobby gaming is that everything needs to be taught.
Yeah.
And I respect that. Teaching is a great thing. And sharing of knowledge and exposing people to new things is wonderful.
So I have that / spectrum of memory. In my experience, everyone's memory works differently. And not only that, at different levels as well,
100%.
right? So how much information people can retain and how they retain it.
Yeah.
You need to be aware that it is different for everyone.
Yes, and broadly speaking, it is really hard for new gamers to do this, and I respect that. But broadly speaking, you have a bit of an obligation. Part of the social contract is don't sit down to play a game if you have good reason to believe that it's out of your depth, which is fine. I mean, it is not the case that everyone should be playing heavy Lacerdas. It is not the case that everyone wants to play the intense negotiation games. It is not the case that everyone should be playing the improvisational games or storytelling games. If it's out of your depth, if you know that you're not going to be able to pull your weight in terms of keeping the game together, now, you might not know. If you don't know, that's fine. And to a large extent, you learn by failing. That's okay. But if you have good reason to believe that you're going to be a serious impediment to the game's procedure, you got to bow out. Don't sit down to that. Don't come in blind. Ask the relevant questions. Does it have X? Does it have Y?
I've written something down. I want to pull it back now, but I'm going to read it out anyway, and then you can say, no, Mike, you're wrong.
Oh, boy.
Commit to play a game, play it to the end. Which we've already talked about that. You don't need to do that. But you should definitely sort of say, I am not having fun. Is there any way we can, wrap it up after this turn?
Yeah.
Or for me to pull myself out. So
it's tough. It's really tough.
Right? And yeah.
I agree that it is, I think as a descriptive matter, it is very much part of the social contract to play the game to the end. As a normative matter, I wish that there was a greater degree of flexibility and that the operative social contract was instead continue the game only insofar as you're confident that everyone wants the game to be continued.
But isn't part of the contract making sure that, because the teacher or the person that brought the game wants you to have fun.
Yes.
And
one hopes.
And part of the contract, at least for me, I would want to know that you're not.
Yes.
Like, is it something I'm doing? Did I not explain the game properly?
Some
Are you
people,
internalizing something not the correct way?
That's the way we prefer to do things, but some people would prefer a death march to conclusion.
It's true.
Whether they're the ones experiencing the death march or someone else is experiencing the death march. That, I think, again, as a factual matter, is one of the reasons why the contract looks the way that it is. I wish that the contract were different. That's effectively where we're sitting, I think.
Next up, I have acceptance of outcomes.
100%.
Whether you win or lose, be gracious.
Yeah, you got to accept the outcome. It's really weird to me, and I mean this sincerely, and this is truly strange, for me to look at contemporary electoral politics and acknowledge that hobby gaming is superior. Because the notion of somebody playing a game and saying, nah, I didn't lose. I didn't lose, it was rigged.
Yeah.
Is insane.
Yeah, it's the same thing when I was doing research. It was like there was all this stuff on cheating, and I just
obviously
it's so far out of
Clearly.
what I understand.
Yeah.
I didn't even put it down. I don't even know
it
what
is
to
so
say.
obvious it's not worth to dwell on. Yeah,
True, but even like why it occurs, I don't.
People like to win.
Yeah, but they don't win. They cheated. That's the thing. But it's true, right? You know what I mean? It's true.
Fair
they
enough.
didn't. It just makes no sense to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but this is one of the issues. I've talked about this an awful lot. I think part of the social contract is that you need to try to win in a competitive game. Because if you cease to try to win, I maintain you are subverting the expectations of the structure. I think the structure of playing a board game, a competitive board game, not a cooperative board game, Actually, no. In a cooperative board game, I think the expectation is to win as well. It's just what constitutes winning is different. I think in all contexts, there's this expectation that the game exists as a structure. This contrivance, this weird ritual we're going to engage in works when everyone fulfills their role, and their role in non-trivial amount rests on their attempting to win and pursue their own interests, whether that's individual or collective.
I think a better way to put it is when playing a game, the goal is to win, but it's the goal that is important, not the winning.
Walker, that is almost...
Yes, Mark?
That is almost oracular in its cumbersome phrasing. How did you come up with such a turn of phrase?
I don't know. It just came to me in a vision.
That's the first thing I think of when I think of Michael Walker. I think oracular. Yeah, so here's what I'm getting at. And you mentioned before... We've been in those situations. The two that come up most often, I think, one that happens on occasion is two people who are in often a romantic relationship or in a familial relationship start to behave in ways that are not furthering their own interest. Either they're operating in ways to advance the interest of their opponent, or I think more often that I've encountered in the case of family relationships that are not romantic in nature, they start acting in ways that don't advance their interest just to harm them. Like the number of times I've seen siblings or cousins or parents or whatever, and they just start doing things just to impede the other player. It's wild. And yeah, there are times where the smart move is to impede a certain opponent, but obviously we know the difference in these contexts. And then there's the other behavior, which I genuinely maintain, I don't know, I could be persuaded otherwise, but I genuinely maintain undermines the social contract of the board game, is to do something just to see what happens. You're in an environment where there's player interaction, and you do something at the expense of or the benefit of another player, somewhat at random, just to see what happens. And the rules explain is like, I can walk you through the consequences of what would... No, I just want to see it operate. It's like, if you have that mindset... I think it is incumbent on you, when the rules are being explained, to be like, could we work out an example? If you're if that's how you learn, if that's your mindset, do it then. Or ask for a hypothetical. Don't just do it because you can't be bothered. At that point, I think that fundamentally, in that action, is checking out, and I don't think it's okay. I think it's not pro-social activity.
We don't know anyone like that.
We don't know anyone like that at all. No, certainly not.
We don't play with that person on a regular basis at all.
I know two of them, actually.
My last point goes into that exact same thing, and it's king-making, right?
Yeah.
Taking actions that do not further your cause and thereby allow someone who is not winning at the moment to win.
Yeah. I think that is an important corollary of the element of social contract, that when you're sitting down to play a game, the goal is to win.
I agree.
Assuming there are victory conditions. Obviously, storytelling games where there's no victory conditions whatsoever, there, again, just take the game seriously and there's no interests involved other than that. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good outline. The social contract is there. It's real. We've helped make it explicit. And in making it explicit, we've made it less of a social contract.
That's right.
Anyway, so that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us for So Very Wrong About Games. We hope to see you again soon. Please, I mean this sincerely, take care of yourselves, everyone. It's a hard life out there. Do yourself some favors. Take some time for you if you can. And we hope to see you again soon.
Peace!
You've been listening to So Very Wrong About Games, a board gaming podcast about board games produced by Michael Walker and edited by Mark Bickman. You can find all our information at SoWrongGames.com. Special thanks to What Does It Eat for allowing us to use their most excellent song, FOS, as our intro. You can find them at WhatDoesItEat.com. We hope to see you again soon, and as always, try to be right, but remember, you're so very wrong.